John with Ripewave Audio, back with Yamaha's flagship AV receiver, the Aventage RX-A8A. This unit sells for around $3,500 at list, but you can get it usually less than that. This is very similar to the A6A, which just has two less channels of amplification. It doesn't have quite the same chips on the rear channels, but otherwise, the A6A you can get for about $1,000 less, around $2,500. But the A8A is the flagship with 11 channels of amplification. And this time we're going to look at the sound modes. And this has a lot of them. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do this video was I found it a little confusing. They give you so many options, and I didn't quite know how to interpret. They have buttons here for AI and enhancer and surround decode and program, and trying to make sense of it, what was really happening behind the scenes. And I know that Yamaha has always been involved a lot with DSP, digital signal processing, and this goes back to around 1986 when they had their DSP-1. This was about $850 back then. This was 6 channels. It was complementing at the time these matrix surround sound formats, Dolby surround, the original DTS, and it would simulate various different performance halls. They did measurements around Europe and so forth. They measured 32 different locations, 13 programs for music, 3 programs for film, and 16 effectors for instrument performance. And this would output and simulate for the rear channels and providing some parameters for delay, etc. And this is something when I was younger, we had our first surround sound receiver, which was an Onkyo, and I thought, geez, it would be nice to add this to it. Of course, I wasn't going to ask my dad for something more, but this was exciting to me at the time. Never got one, never heard one, but yeah, this was inspiring to me. And of course, we've evolved since, and here we are now with this flagship from Yamaha. This has a lot of modes, as we said. It also has at the top of the remote a pure direct mode. Lower down on the remote, actually underneath the program selection, is a straight button. Quite a bit different location from the pure direct. And there is a surround AI, as I said. They have these programs, and this invokes their Cinema DSP HD3. And then they have surround decode, this button. And what does that do? These will upmix as the content may not have the full set of channels that you have configured for your speakers, and it will make that upmixing as appropriate as it allows. There's also virtualization options when you don't have speakers for your rear or for your what they call presence, and I call height speakers, either in the ceiling or mounted on the walls. So Yamaha, what they call present speakers, it will simulate those as well. And you can actually assign your different configurations to each individual source. So if you want your high definition ultra Blu-ray player to be one set of parameters and your phono player to be another, it will automatically remember those sound modes per source. But let's look into this. Now, what happens in pure direct mode? This is the simplest, highest quality playback that Yamaha has to offer, and a lot of these receivers and processors offer such a similar mode. What this does is it disables processing modes, and it will also disable some of the circuitry to give you that most pure, most direct signal path. As a result, a lot of options are not available. So the Cinema DSP HD3 is not available. The surround AI is not available. The zone functions aren't available. You also lose your setup and option menu. So your on-screen display will stop working with those options. The front display here will turn off, but you're left with the indicators that will show that this is in pure direct mode. So there's a little highlight, illuminates back of the pure direct label on the front of this, which will come on, and I can move it to this mode now, and you can see the results there when you move it into that results. You'll notice too, in their specifications, they specify this to pure direct modes. So they're reporting on frequency to the front channels with pure direct mode, and they're saying this can go 10 to 100,000 hertz plus or minus 3 dB. They're not reporting it for the non-pure direct mode. We'd like to know what it happens in non-pure direct mode as well. Total harmonic distortion, less than 0.05%, depending, of course, of whether it's phono or if it's a regular audio signal. But again, pure direct mode. Signal to noise ratio, again, reporting here. And when you're in pure direct mode on phono, it's giving 95 dBs or more. And then audio 2, it's giving 110 dBs. So there is a difference when you do this in pure direct mode. It does jump up quite a bit on the signal to noise ratio. So you do actually hear the difference here. With the straight connection, I said, well, how does that vary from the pure direct? Now, you still lose your sound fields, but you do have two channel support. There is unprocessed multi-channel will work with this. It will do upmixing in straight mode from if given a 5.1 source, it wants to put those surround backs on, if you have them, to 7.1. And it supports the virtual cinema front. So there's some processing that's enabled in straight mode, but you don't have all the extra processing there. You do not have the dialogue lift, so some options aren't available. And the virtual surround back speaker is disabled. So if you have surround backs, it will use them. And if you don't, it won't simulate them. And that's the straight mode. Now let's talk about their three-dimensional sound fields. And I believe these are inherited back to that original generation from 1980s with the DSP-1. A lot of these features, I believe, have come forward. They may have enhanced or added or removed things over time, but it has that heritage. So you're able to do adjustments to the DSP levels. You're able to work with Dolby speaker virtualization. You do not get access to this three-dimensional sound fields in straight or pure direct, as we mentioned, but you don't also get in the surround artificial intelligence AI, which we'll talk about a little later. And DSD is not supported with these sound modes. The various types of sound fields that they give you. Now, there's different categories. There's a music category, a movie, which I consider really a video mode, because there's things that are non-movie in this category, and stereo behaviors, as well as unprocessed on a surround decode. So there's various halls in music, halls in Munich and Vienna and Amsterdam, etc., churches in Freiburg, and chamber halls, etc. And they're all in that music category. When you move over what they call movie, I call video, which is basically content that would normally have video associated with it: sports, action games, role-playing games, music videos, a recital with opera, a spectacle, sci-fi, adventure, etc. And then you have the stereo category. And this is kind of unique because what they're doing here is applying some of their sound effects to two-channel, but they're not the same options. It's really just how you balance the signal out. And then they have all-channel that takes the two front channel stereos and replicates it to each layer. So the stereo signal is fed to the surround and the surround back and the front presence and the rear presence. And that's the all-channel. And of course, we have unprocessed. Now, when you get into the DSP parameters, each one of these modes have various parameters, and they're not consistent. But that I've tried to build this table up here that really show how these vary. Now, they all have the ability to adjust the DSP level, but the other parameters vary between the mode that you're in. Now, room size is only available for the hall environments and the room theater and the mono movie, as well as spectacle, sci-fi, adventure, and drama movies, as well as sports game, video opera, and enhanced. And initial delay is available on everything except for standard playback. And you can see the values here. Some of these are set in milliseconds, some are in dBs, some don't have any unit associated with them all at all, like room size. What is 0.1 to 2 in a room size? And the manuals on these, and part of why I've done this is they're not very descriptive. You go even on the online PDF version, and you say, I want to see Cinema DSP, and it's got it in the table of contents, and it takes you to a page, and it says this section talks about this, and then you get to another, and you finally get to the part where it actually describes it, and it says something still pretty vague. There are some parameters that seem to be only associated with music, with the exception of mono movie. Liveliness, and all the reverb settings. Reverb, you can adjust the level, the time, and the delay. When you get to the video-based DSP modes, there are also some parameters that are dedicated. All the surround ones, the surround room size, delay, and liveliness, as well as that same set of parameters for the surround back. And depending on what you're looking at, may or may not apply to that particular setting. So that's there for you to explore. I just wanted you to realize that there is all these different other parameters, not just turning it on and off, but you can vary how much this is applied and how much delays, etc., that you're going to use in its calculation to what goes to the speaker and when. Now let's talk about virtual speakers, and they've got a lot of options here. First, virtual front. So if you just have a front stage with left, right, and center, and that's it, maybe a subwoofer or two, what it will try to do is virtualize, simulate other speakers in the room, side surrounds and rear surrounds, but not the presence. This virtual cinema front will just take those ear level, kind of simulate ear level. Now, what's said is this is typically not as good as what you'd get with a sound bar, which does the same type of simulation, but the speakers are angled. Your normal speakers are all just pushing forward to you, and now to simulate other characteristics becomes more difficult. So in this little icon graphic, and you'll see this throughout the presentation, the purple is the virtualized speakers. So we can take like a 3.2 or 3.x source, and then that gets virtualized up to 7.2. The next feature they have is called Virtual Present Speaker, or VPS. And this is where it's trying to simulate what's on your height or ceiling speaker, or even a Dolby Atmos reflective speaker. And so here it will simulate what you would have for a presence front and a presence rear. This will take a 7.1.4 signal that will virtualize the .4 and give you those speakers. So then you also have virtual surround back, or VSBS, as they say. And this will take, the same thing. Now, if this is a 5.1.4 signal that you're getting in, so you'll need to use the virtual surround back speaker system. You'll need a source that's either giving you 6.1 or 7.1 content, and then it will virtualize those back speakers. These virtual options are unavailable when you're in 2-channel stereo mode, all-channel mode, surround decode, or straight. So you have to be in one of the DSP modes. Now let's talk about the surround AI. This came back around 2018. Yamaha introduced this in their receivers at the time, and they were really promoting this. It takes an immersive signal, and it tries to detect the dialogue and the background music and the ambient sounds and the sound effects from each other and treat them specially so that they're a little more immersive. And this is on a scene by scene. In a way, I feel like what they're trying to do with this is remix what you're getting from those immersive signals and give their own treatment to it. Maybe sort of like what IMAX Enhanced does to a DTSX soundtrack. It's trying to do its own specialized enhancement to make that dialogue or the music or the ambient sound and sound effects more clear and more enveloping. This is analyzing it 5 times a second or 200 milliseconds. It's doing this analysis. And this is the graphic that they show with it. I'm not sure they're promoting this as they were back in 2018, but it's still in the product. Now, there are times where I think it sounds better with it and sometimes better without it. Surround decode. This is going to be what you normally see in an AV receiver of the modern day, right? So there'll be an auto, which is going to figure out what the source is for the surround. DTSX or Dolby, and those work just fine. Aural 3D, though, isn't auto-detected unless it's sent by PCM. Then you can put it in DSIR mode. I don't know why they abbreviate it like that, but that's their hard locking it on the Dolby surround decoder versus auto-detecting, although it's going to default to Dolby in most cases. Then there's Neural X, and the Neural X is whenever it detects a DTS signal. It's limited to 48 kilohertz signals. That's interesting. You cannot use Virtual Cinema Front or Virtual Cinema DSP with Neural X. So if you have a DTSX source, you're not going, and you're using the Neural X decoder, you're not going to get those virtual modes. Now, Aural 3D, as I said, wasn't auto-detected. So you have to hard set it to Aural 3D to get Aural 3D to work. Now, they also have dialogue options. So there's 3 different dialogue options. First is the dialogue level, and this works with most environments, except for DTSX, which has its own. So dialogue level can be 0 to 3, the default being 0. So you still hear dialogue, it's just not amplifying it. So this refers to the center channel content. Then there's DTSX dialogue control. This has values from 0 to 6. It only works with DTSX content. And again, the default value is 0, and when you go up to 6, it's increasing the effect of the dialogue. So if you want to boost that up a little bit, you've got that. Now, aside from raising the volume, there's this thing called dialogue lift. Now, if you're like me and you have your center channel below your screen and not behind it with an acoustically transparent screen, this is going to try to lift that up using the present speakers in conjunction with this, and you can apply that effect from 0 to 5. And I guess you have to play with it until it sounds like it's well balanced. So you either have to be running in the surround AI mode, you have to be that or a sound program with present speakers or virtual present speakers, and then you'll get this effect. It's not available with 2-channel or all-channel stereo or surround decode or straight. Aural 3D playback. So, as we said, you have to go and select specifically Aural 3D. Now, the listening mode for Aural 3D, you can either set it to Aural 3D, and then it's going to allow for Auro-matic upmixing up to 7.1.4 for non-native sources, and it will make use of your present speakers. If you set it to surround, there'll be no use of your height presence speakers. So you'll only get up to 7.1. If you set it to native, there'll be no upmixing or no Auro-matic at all, and it will just play back whatever is encoded on the source. When you use Aural 3D, you cannot use the Cinema DSP HD3 modes. Furthermore, you can go into the settings for Auro-matic, and you go into the Auro-matic presets. Now, this is going to default to medium, so you can set your room kind of like a small, medium, large, movie, or speech, and you get different levels of applying the Aural 3D effect. You also control the strength of this to happen, and the default is 12, and this can vary between 0 and 15, where 0 is really just turning off the upmix altogether. So that is, I think, just for the upmixing capabilities. Now let's look at this as you apply different content. Now, of course, if you put in a Dolby Atmos disc or a DTSS disc or Aural 3D disc, you can assume it's going to go into the right speakers. Where I was a little confused is if you take content like a compact disc, PCM's compact disc, 2-channel audio, what is the system going to do in different modes? Now, with a CD, which is just 2-channel, you put it in Pure Direct, you get 2 channels. It doesn't send information to your subwoofer. But if you hit the straight button, your now subwoofer is going to take over if you have that configured for the low frequencies. If you hit one of the Cinema DSP HD3 things for music, it will upmix it. Now this is different. If you pick one of the music ones, it's going to upmix it to 4.1.4. If you use one of the movie settings, it's going to upmix it to 7.2.4. Now, if you go to one of the surround decoders, Dolby Surround, Neural X, Aural 3D, you're going to get the full 7.2.4 upmixing with your 2-channel audio. And the same thing with Surround AI. Now, I also have a DTS HD Blu-ray that is a disc that has quadraphonics. I have the Doobie Brothers, and I have the Chicago one, and they're 4 channels quad mix from the early 70s. It takes those quad mixes in Pure Direct, which is 4.0, and what you actually get is 6.2 output. So it's giving you the rear channels when there's no rear channel, the surround back channel information, and it's also directing to both of your subwoofers. Same thing with straight button. So whether Pure Direct or straight, that's where you're getting 6.2.0. If you go to the Cinema DSPs, those, regardless of music or movie, it's going to come out at 6.2.4. So it then uses the immersive height channels. And if you go to one of the surround decoders, you're going to get on Dolby Surround and Aural 3D, well, a little different. You're going to get, for Dolby Surround, you're going to get 6.2.4. For Neural X, you're not going to get the .4 at the end. You're just going to get 6.2 because Neural X can't do that. Aural 3D is going to give you 7.2.4. And so is Surround AI. Did another test. Took just a standard movie that was DTS HD MA. That was a 5.1.0 encoding. When you put it in Pure Direct or straight mode, you got 7.2.0 out. So it's upmixing, it's giving you the back channels, and it's giving you that extra subwoofer that it's replicating. For all the other modes, it's 7.2.4. I took another movie that was encoded this time as a 7.1.0, same DTS master. And these became 7.2 on straight and Pure Direct, 7.2.4 on the Cinema DSP, but also on all the surround and surround AI modes. So that's what that did with that source. Couple more. DSD, Super Audio Disc, 2-channel version of a Super Audio Disc. I get in pure direct 2-channel audio. But if I go to straight, I get a 2.1. It only runs one of my subwoofers. If I take a DSD Super Audio Disc that's encoded as 5.1 multi-channel, it gives you those back channels. So I get a 7.2.0. So it makes use of both subwoofers. And for straight, also 7.2.0. None of the other modes are available with DSD. There are a few more options and modes that we want to talk about here. First of all, there's a bunch of volume modes. So you'll have the YPAO volume. So if you've run the YPAO system, this will automatically raise lows and high frequencies based on YPAO results as the volume decreases. So this is useful as, it's when you're at the higher volumes, the dynamics are different, and you tend to lose the same impact on the highs and lows as you decrease the volume there. So Odyssey has something similar in the Denon Marantz processors as well. They also have a adaptive DRC. So this is dynamic range correction. So it's also doing something similar. As the volume decreases, then it is compressing the dynamic range as well. So if you're in a light night mode listening, or you got neighbors, you're not going to disturb them as much. And finally, there's an adaptive DSP, digital signal processing level. So this is when you have those DSP effect levels. They're going to automatically change as well when the volume changes based on the YPAO results. So you have those three things that affect, let's say, volume, but also dynamic range and DSP. So it's more than just volume. Then you have a compressed music mode. So they have this high-res mode, which really doesn't seem to do anything more than to enable this other feature, or the use of the other feature called enhancer, which can be turned on and off separately. So the enhancer has the ability to add depth and breadth to compressed music. It does require 2-channel uncompressed or lossless compressed source with that high-res mode enabled. This is not going to be available for signals over 48 kilohertz or with DSD audio sources. They have also a Dolby and DTS dynamic range. So with Dolby and DTS sources, there's different settings here. So maximum, which is basic, we're not going to compress the dynamic range at all. So most of us are going to leave it at maximum. If you hit it to standard, they're saying this is general home use. And if you set it to minimal, this is good for night listening modes. Now, if you have a true HD source, then this is going to automatically adjust. Then they have tone controls, and you can adjust the treble and the bass plus or minus 6 dB in half a dB increments. Now the treble is going to turn over at 3.5 kilohertz and the bass at 350 hertz. The DACs have options in here. So there's one is the jitter, low jitter PLL mode. So there's 3 levels. The more you go up in levels, so from level 1 to 2 to 3, 3 giving you the most jitter reduction. Now there could be some performance issues as you add this, but try to use as much jitter reduction as the system will support. They also have a choice of digital filters for the DAC. So a sharp roll-off type, which is what they call clear, or it's a sharp bank filter. A slow roll type, which it gives you a soft, gentle band filter. And then finally, a short latency, a quick one for more rhythm. It gives you less delay. There is a bass mode called extra bass. Now what this does is it will send front speaker bass information to your subwoofer when the speakers are even set to large. So if you want to listen to certain content type and you say it's only coming from the front speakers, this is a way to also send the signal to your subwoofers. Now the warning here is, even though when you have your speakers set to small, it will let you run this, I don't recommend it because it's not integrated well with the bass. And so you get these weird humps on the response. And then final on the, we do have a balanced input on this unit. And if you want to attenuate, because balanced inputs have a 6 dB gain, if you want to attenuate it down 6 dBs, you can do so by turning this on to the ATT value or leave it in bypass mode. And that goes over all the options. I just want to quickly show here as well the menu interface that you can get and get into a lot of these settings simply by going into the web page setup mode and knowing your IP address. And you can get that IP address from your network information on the receiver. Once you know that, put the IP address into a web browser and do /setup with a computer on the same network. And it's going to bring up a general page. Notice here you get control not just over the main, but the zone 2, 3, and 4 settings. And you can have different values for each. And whether you got the straight and so forth are all here. This just makes it, I feel, a lot easier to configure. We talked about some of these parameters that are on the sound page, the dynamic range, whether that's going to be maximum, standard, or minimum, the pure direct mode. How is it going to be handling that? Is it going to turn video off when you're in pure direct? Are you going to run any virtual speakers? Are you going to run adaptive DSP levels, speaker virtualization? What's your DAC filter going to be? This is all in here, plus some other items we haven't talked about yet, like lip sync and stuff that have more to do with the video signal. When it comes down to the jitter, we can apply that setting on each input differently, as you can with these other settings. So that can be very useful if you want to apply these effects differently depending on your input source. And you can apply trims to each one of the input sources as well. That is there in the menu. Just a quick overview here. When you go to the DSP tab, we mentioned here about all the different sound modes that they have in their unique DSP system. And if you don't use a lot of these, if you don't like some of these, you can actually have a DSP skip and it's not even going to show up. And how these are going to be available to each one of the inputs, and it gives you a lot of pre-programming, so you don't have to reconfigure this every time you change an input. It can go back to it. And as we mentioned, for each one of these DSP parameters, you have the levels and the delays and the room size depending on what the type of DSP that you're applying, and they have different parameters in there. So let's just quickly showing you where that's at. Of course, you can set up scenes as well that are accessible through the remote, and combines all these settings together exactly the way you want it. So these are all good. And I think this is a good place to wrap it up for this week. And my big complaint is the manual really just doesn't go far enough. I found that I had to go and kind of test these things out myself, see what speakers were on, and kind of summarize it here for you. And I hope this, for those that have this receiver or the other ones in its series with the same functions, it's kind of unlocked it a little bit more for you. And if you have more to tell me, I'll take that feedback as well. So if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. If you want to take your involvement to the next level, consider having a Patreon membership at www.patreon.com/Ripewave. You can always do a one-time donation with the thanks button. And if you want to be notified when the next video is posted, it costs nothing to hit that bell notification so you'll notified when the next video is posted. Until then, keep evolving your audio experience.